Hello and welcome to the second episode of the I Need Healing podcast produced by the FIMU Alpha Overwatch League. I'm your host, Shakkaconn, currently hard stuck low diamond on off support and off tank. We hope with our help, you too can be stuck in low diamond someday. If you missed our first episode, you should know that this podcast is being made to help out the lower SR players in our league and anyone else who may stumble upon it. Every Monday for 3 more weeks, we will be dropping a podcast with new guests each week answering community-submitted questions. During this podcast, we will have 3 guests, 2 of which are some of our higher-ranked players, and the third will be somebody who has run the gauntlet and climbed from the lower ranks to the higher ranks. With that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce our first guest, Shooshyfoof.
Hey, how's it going?
Our second guest is Omnilus.
Hello, I'm Omnilus.
And then our third is Macnar.
Hello.
And with that, we'll go ahead and dive into this week's first question. I'm reviewing my gameplay while limiting which heroes and roles I play, and I'm still inconsistent. I either lose 4 in a row or win 4 in a row. How can I become more consistent? Shooshyfoof.
Basically, it just comes down to being consistent with analyzing your gameplay, doing the same thing when you analyze. For me, personally, I like to, take a piece of paper and I split it up into 4 boxes. One box is positioning, the other box is ability usage, another one is target focus, and the last one is mechanics. And I watch through my gameplay 4 times, and I just kind of do a play-by-play of what I'm doing regarding that ability. So if I'm going over positioning and I'm playing, let's say Hanzo, and I'm on Junkertown, right? And I say, okay, I'm on Junkertown, point B, I'm on the high ground right now. It gives me good vantage point, and I can snipe people out in open positions. And I say, I'm still there, and then I jump down, and I kind of come up with a reason why I jumped down. And if it's crap, then it was a crap move on me, right? But if it's there's something that can be justified, then it wasn't a bad move. But it kind of you can keep yourself honest in that regard. And same with mechanics. Especially with mechanics is I kind of slow down my gameplay once I get into a fight. And you can really see if your aim is complete poo-poo if you go to 0.25 speed, and it's very disheartening if you're bad like me. So yeah, that's how I review my gameplay, and it's consistent, and it's helped me a lot recently.
Yeah, I think another thing that helps is knowing that losses are going to happen. So maybe not 4 or 5 in a row. There comes a point where you might need to stop and just take a step back, do those reviews, Shooshyfoof is saying, take the time to slow your gameplay down. But also, if you're just grinding into the same hero and you're doing the same things, you're not going to get any better. So what I recommend is to get a friend of either way higher SR, or just of higher SR, or someone who is better at the hero than you are that you're wanting to learn, or the position that you're wanting to learn, and just get into quick play and let them kind of shadow you, if you will, and give you tips as you play. That's some of the best ways I've learned how to play was, my first season in the league. I was on the OSS with Shakkaconn, and that's what he did, was he would watch my gameplay, tell me where I sucked, and ways to fix it. So kind of get a little, get a coach. We have a coach system now that's super, super awesome. Use that, but or just ask someone who's just a little bit better at the hero than you are, or the position you are, and ask for their help, but in-game. And not every practice session has to be in a competitive game. Take the time in a quick play, lower stakes game to really iron out your mechanics, aside from, along with your reviewing.
I also think it's good to evaluate yourself mentally after 1 or 2 games. Be like, am I on my game? Am I just not here? Am I just playing to have fun today? Comp is a lot. It's a lot of your mindset. If you go into it with, oh, my teammates are going to be just bad, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, just having a very negative outlook, you're not going to have a good time, A, and B, you're probably going to lose that game. It's... Yeah, I get it. Teammates are dumbasses. You know who's also dumbasses? The enemy team. They have 6 chances to get bad players, and you only have 5. And once you realize that, and then realize that you're making stupid mistakes too, because you're around, like, not to be rude or anything, but everyone makes stupid mistakes at times. Like, I do all the fucking time. And then, everyone I know does. It's because we're not perfect players, and we never will be. And once you stop looking at it as this game was lost because X player did this, and look at it as, what could I have done to do this? You'll become a lot more consistent, or what could I have done to win this game? You'll become a lot more consistent just because of that.
Yeah, one of the important things to know is that sometimes it's your fault, other times it's not. In our last episode, Foxen mentioned that you have about a third chance to either just win because your team's going to carry you, a third chance to lose because your team's going to int, or a third chance where you're actually going to be able to make an impact. So sometimes it's just unwinnable, and that's okay. And that has nothing to do with your consistency or inconsistency. So moving forward through all this, you need to just be aware that sometimes you can't control it, and the things that you can control, you need to work at controlling. So you need to look at, am I being dumb? Am I positioning poorly? And all this kind of stuff. Self-review is super important, especially if you get out of a game and say, well, how did I lose that game? What's happening here? You can immediately go into the replay system and just watch through. That will also serve as a break for you, where you can kind of break with the people that you might be in queue with, or just kind of come back with a fresh mindset. Like Dustin said, it is such an important thing to have your mindset right. One thing I was told early on in my days of playing Overwatch by, I believe it was Miles, underused anus, if you will. He told me that on any given day, you're either 500 SR better than where you're ranked, or 500 SR worse than where you're ranked. And it all just depends on what kind of day it is. So with how inconsistent it is, you just kind of have to accept that it's gonna be inconsistent. Because the only way to truly breed consistency is to practice a lot. Like unhealthy amounts of hours, like 8 hours a day at minimum, just practicing what you're trying to do and then applying it into the games later. So that's kind of my take on it. Do you guys have any other final thoughts?
No, I think everyone covered things pretty well. Reviewing your footage is a necessity, because you'll be able to identify what you're doing wrong and improve consistency that way. Having other people talk to you better, review it as well. That's a good idea. Having your mental state in the right area, otherwise you're going to lose games just because you're not there. You're not playing at 100%.
All right, so sounds like Peanut Gallery is pretty quiet about the end of this question, so we'll go ahead and move on to the second one, okay? How do you adapt when your role is taken?
Well, I generally don't have this problem because I play main tank. No one wants to play main tank. First of all, let's clear that up. Sometimes I'll want to play off tank, but in general, to adapt when your role is taken, you just have to be a little bit flexible in the first place. You can't always expect to go in. And for me, I've more hours in Reinhardt than any other hero in this game. Big surprise. But sometimes I'll run into a Rein main. I'm like, okay, I'll swap off and play the Zarya to help him because I know what a Rein wants. Or very rarely I'll play a DPS, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable playing a healer. And that's me. I know what roles I can fill in a team, but you have to have a certain amount in order to a certain amount of flexibility in order to have that work. Yeah, I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, he's exactly right. You've got to be able to pick. You've got to have a backup a hero. Like I like when I go into games, I always think, if someone insta-locks my hero, there's a very good chance they're trying to do the same thing I'm doing. And so for me, I can fall back. I know I can fall back on support because in my mind, it's the same as DPS, just I'm hitting allies instead. But it's, you like he says, you have to be flexible, and that understanding that, someone is trying to do the same thing you are. You're trying to be better at your hero. There's someone who with the exact same mindset. And also, you can honestly ask, like, the Overwatch community is still good enough that you're not going to get yelled at to uninstall the game if you ask to potentially swap heroes. Some people are understanding to that, and others will say, sorry, this is my best hero and I want to win. So just knowing that that's an option still and falling back to another role when you need to.
All right, well, I'm glad I went last on this question because I have a more controversial take on this question. Yeah. So the question, again, just to restate it, was how do you adapt when your role is taken? And my answer to that, honestly, if you're trying to improve at a role, climb, and get better, and emphasis on get better, I say you don't flex. And let me explain myself. So, yes, you're going to want a good comp, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes there are going to be games that you lose on, the hero select screen, right? We've all been there. Like, you get into a game and it's like, oh crap, everyone just insta-locked 4 DPS and I'm like a support player or whatever. What my advice would be is to take that moment to try and find ways to use your hero that you want to play or your role, because again, there's multiple heroes for a role, right? Find ways to make it work. Because if you can learn to make it work in a suboptimal situation, in an optimal situation, you're going to be a lot better at it. Does that make sense? So, if you're trying to improve at a certain role, try to flex as little as possible. Sometimes, yes, you're going to have to. But that's my controversial take on it.
Yeah, and I think that one thing we mentioned last week, again, pulling back from there, is that we need to play the heroes that we're best at in a lot of situations, especially in the lower ranks that we kind of all exist in, We're not playing at the GM or top 500 level where we have to be a meta slave or have to play a certain comp. We can just play what we're good at. Say you're, to use the exact same example as last week, say you are a mid-gold Hanzo player and you have 3 DPS insta-locked and you want to play healer because you know that your team needs a healer, but you also really just want to climb and win a game, but your Zen play is probably about the silver level, you should probably just play the Hanzo instead, because you're going to be able to play that Hanzo at your mid-gold level or higher, or maybe a little bit lower, whichever it is, but it gives you the best chance to actually win. Versus if you're playing a silver level Zenyatta, you're not going to do very well in your mid-gold game. You're playing at a silver level. How do you expect to win a gold game? So this all comes back to sometimes you really just have to be aware of what kind of situation you're in and just play what you're good at. At the lower ranks, you can just play what you're good at. And, as for just the pure question of adapting when your role's taken, if you feel comfortable on playing a different hero, then go for it. But you really kind of have to think to yourself, what's the best way that I can make this work? It may not be the most optimal comp, but how do you enable your teammates? You have to trust your teammates in the spawn room. You have to. As the game develops, you can form your own opinions if you want, but you have to trust them to do your job, or to do their job. And then you need to do yours. So you have to think, okay, well, they're going to do exactly what they need to do, so I then need to do this to help us win. And that's the kind of game you need to play. And you need to make sure it's within your powers. If you're trying to play a Zenyatta at a mid-gold level when you're like a silver Zen, you're not going to be able to help them the way that they need help. but you can help them better if you just play Hanzo instead. So if you really want to be able to adapt when your role gets taken, don't be a one-trick. Because you'll always have something else to swap onto if you have a little bit of a bigger hero pool. And this doesn't mean learning half the heroes in the game. It means learning a couple extra, like 3 or 4 more heroes in different roles. You don't even have to learn all the tanks. You can learn a couple DPS players and then a couple healers. Just make it work, you know? Whatever works for you, you know how you play better than anybody else does. So just look into all that and think to yourself what you can do. Always ask yourself that question and enable your teammates the best you can.
Like I was saying, me being almost a Ryan one trick, right? Sometimes it gets to where it may not be the best decision, or like looking at like from a comp standpoint, if people are getting picked off from a Widow, right? And I'm playing like an off tank for whatever reason, it may not be the best decision comp-wise to swap to Winston, but in that scenario, I'm better at Winston than I am D.Va, and that may be the only way I can protect my team in that case. And it works, but it's not optimal. You know, it's not whatever.
Yeah, I think the combination of what everyone is saying is what really hits the nail on the head. You have to really, again, look at yourself and say, what can I do? Where can I be optimal? Between what AJ and Hunter said about if another hero's not at the skill level it needs to be, don't be that hero. Just play the character you're good at in order to get the W. But, there's a joke, like, in one of our Discords, my nickname is Hanzana, because I can play those two at about the same level anymore. So if I need to play support, I can play Ana, but if I need to, DPS, I can run the Hanzo. So I know that about myself. I'm not going to try to fill into main tank if that happens. I just know that that's not within my capability. So take what everyone is saying and really look at where you find yourself the most comfortable.
Right. So seems like we've gotten a good answer to that. We'll go ahead and move to the third and final question for this week. My aim is decent at best, so I have made a conscious decision to play my positioning and decision making as my win condition in most fights. How do you properly play around a team who either isn't in comms or refuses to do what they are told, or even calling themselves? And specifically, I believe the asker here is a main tank or an off tank.
So I have a lot of experience with this, mainly because my internet was on campus and they actually blocked my team voice chat. So I'm used to playing with teams that I literally can't speak to. I can't say much for the main tank, off tank side specifically, but it just comes down to knowing how the game is played. I find myself most whenever I'm playing like Ana, I have to follow my main tank around and make sure that I'm playing my position. So it's kind of like a game of chess in a way where you have to know, in my mind, I'm thinking about Rialto, that opening. And so I obviously know I can't just charge the payload as Ana because I'll die, even if I'm with my main tank. But I know my main tank's going to round that corner as soon as he can. So it's about knowing where I can position myself that I'm not going to be in the most immediate danger, but being able to make sure that I'm keeping my main tank healed up. Now, occasionally, especially if you play with someone like Dustin, who is just going to hit shift and hope he hits somebody.
Hello.
Here's the thing. Within the first 20 seconds of the game, you're going to know whether or not your main tank is that kind of person. So it's all about being able to know what types of people you might end up playing with, and knowing how to work your way around it. It's like being handed a lopsided chessboard. You have to know where you can position yourself to stay alive, but you have to get yourself at the maximum impact point. And you're not always going to have comms, so it's just something you're going to have to get used to doing. Being able to read your team within about the first 30 seconds of the game, whether or not they're going to be super aggro, whether or not they're going to be super on the defensive. Knowing that so that you can know how to position yourself to be the most advantageous to your team.
It's difficult because you're going to get people who just don't answer, right? And just don't listen. But the thing is, you can't let that get to you, just because some people just don't really, like, this is going to sound really bad, but they don't really care about getting better. They just care about playing and just kind of having fun, even if they're like, losing, whatever. The best way to like deal with this is just keep calling things, like keep trying to like learn how to be a shot caller. And if someone doesn't listen to you, then, I mean, what else can you do? You can just keep trying. Eventually you'll get someone that listens to you. And then when someone does listen to you, like, it's going to be great. That's why, again, duo queuing and trio queuing is really good. But yeah, so I would just continue to like, just do your best. Worry about what you're doing. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. If you're meant to climb, you will.
I have a lot of experience with that, being a main tank player who's hella fucking aggressive way too often. My team definitely, most of the time, does not follow me, so I just end up feeding. But in order to help minimize that, the duo and the trio queues can help with that. Having 2 or 3 people on like sort of the same page is going to be a lot better than I'm often whatever and then everyone else is doing their own thing. But at a certain point, you also got to recognize that not everyone's going to follow you, so maybe it's better for you to follow them. Play more at their pace than your own, because if they're not listening to what you're saying, then you might as well just be feeding your brains out 24/7. It's useless. You're doing nothing. So you want to help them do their job, not necessarily have them help you, if you know what I mean.
One of the biggest things to realize in comp is that you're not always going to be the carry. In most situations, you're not going to be the carry, because it's a team-based game. So you're not gonna be carrying very often in the game. So if you're not going to be that point of the attack, even if you're playing the main tank, say you have a 3-stack on your team and you're just solo queuing, and then there's another duo stack, they're going to be working well together, but they're not really going to be caring about you all too much in most situations. Now, sometimes, of course, you're going to get a really great team that works really well together and comms really well, but if you're that solo queuer and you've got 2 other groups on your team that aren't really calming too much or really helping you at all, if you're just going in and doing what you think is right, it's not going to be right because you're alone. Maybe it would be right if everybody went with you, but since nobody's going with you, you're just feeding. And you have to understand that, even if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing it alone, it's wrong. Say they're all doing the wrong thing, but they're doing it together. If you were just with them, the chances of success go up significantly. You don't have to know this game super well to be able to win team fights or win games. So just play with your team. You don't have to be the leader. If they're disagreeing with your calls, then just go with their calls. It's better to just go with their calls, even if you think they're wrong, because you'll be doing them together, and you're not going to tilt your team, and you're not going to get tilted yourself. It's so multi-layered here, because you're going to prevent the mindset thing changing. Like, you're not going to get tilted, you're not going to tilt your team, and then you're all going to be together. Even if you're being idiots together, at least you're together, and you can still win fights. So, like you said here, you say that your aim is decent at best, and you're trying to work on your positioning and your decision making as your win condition. Well, you have to play with your team, and if they're not listening to you, then maybe you should listen to them. And say they're not in comms at all, and nobody's saying anything. Well, pay attention. You have eyes, and you can look around. So look around, see what your team's doing, and just help your team. As a main tank, that should be your main goal, is to help your team, whether that's creating space, killing them, like killing the enemy team, or just being there to protect them with a big rectangle. You know, you can be Rectangle Boy and protect your whole team and be effective, or you can be WMouse1 Reinhardt that doesn't care and has gold damage. Either one works as long as your team is going together. And that's the big thing you should take away from this, is that the most optimal thing doesn't have to be what you have to do, right? The most optimal thing doesn't mean it's the best thing, especially if your team's not playing completely stacked. You're going to want to be aggressive, but you can't because your team can't actually help you. I would like to thank our 3 guests for coming on to chat about Overwatch. It's been nice having you all. I'd also like to thank all of you for sticking through to the end. Please join us next week for our 3rd episode of the I Need Healing podcast. I've been Shakkaconn, and...
I need healing!
I need healing.
I need healing!
I need healing. I need healing.
I need healing.